Hello, I'm Robert, and just to explain this idea that they've got on the TV and the US is presenting that somehow Russia could take over the city of Kiev in 2 to 3 days. And this makes absolutely no sense. And I base this on a military analysis from Ukraine itself. So to start off, then imagine you're driving along this road, and this is the road to Kiev. And if you're a tourist, and it's a nice pleasant journey, you've got trees on either side, with now to you're in Kiev. And you just have a pleasant drive. Now imagine you are a Russian soldier in a tank, and you're not supposed to be there, you're an invasion army, and you're driving along this road, and then immediately that you cross the border into Belarus, then there'll be very high alert, and Ukrainian soldiers and helicopters and so forth. Well, you've destroyed actually, they would have prepared, according to these plans, supposedly, they prepared by destroying the Ukrainian Air Force in a couple of days. Well, I mean, then, having done that, you've got obviously going to have soldiers to either side in the forests with these weapons. And this is what they can use. These are an automatically tank weapon that can destroy a tank, and it can destroy a modern Russian tank from up to 2 kilometers away. And they're automated. When they fire the weapon, it's kind of fire and forget. That they find the tank in a little TV screen they look at, and then they say that's what we've got to hit. They fire it, and then they run out of the way. They shoulder mounted, so they take it with them, and they just rush out of the way into hiding, and the opponents don't know, won't even be able to find them to fire back. So you're along here with your driving down this road in your tank, and then to either side in that forest could be 2 kilometers away. There could be people with these shoulder-mounted tank-busting weapons, and any moment one of those is going to hit you, and you're going to be killed by it. Now you've got a very different experience driving into Kiev. This will be a death trap. Many of the soldiers will die during this. So for sure, if they go in with hundreds of tanks, then some of them will get into Kiev, but quite a few will be destroyed on the way in. And then, that's going to be a very bad start, because the Russians aren't going to be too keen on all the coffins going back to Russia as a result of this attempt to subdue Kiev. And then what's the objective? The objective doesn't make any sense, because Kiev is a city of 3 million people, and it's got a very organised resistance. Where do I have my section about the resistance? Yes, they've actually. It's not like if they're trying to do this in the United Kingdom, where I live, where people don't have a clue about resisting. This is on the border of Russia, and I've seen active resistance movements with Crimea and the Donbass region. They're actively fighting, experienced fighters, and then they have the organised civilian resistance movement actually put in place by law, and they know what to do. If the country was invaded by Russia, they make things really hard for Russia and hope they eventually left. And Ukraine has a history of doing this in the past. They fought back against Russia and Germany in the past, and they can do it again. So once you get to Kiev, you've got 3 million people in Kiev, and you don't have friendly people there. You want to take over the soldiers, you want to take over the army, you want to take over the police, whatever. They're going to be fighting you. They're not going to be corrupted by you. And you're trying to get the government. You've got your puppet government. You've got your 30,000 soldiers sort of around the house, around their parliament or whatever they have, and nobody will recognise it. No other country would recognise your puppet government. Your supposed new president would just be, he'd been an armoured car or something, and nobody would pay the blindest bit of attention to him in Ukraine. They just ignore whatever he says, and you haven't got the whole apparatus of police or army to enforce his commands. Not yet. And you've got the organised resistance, and in Ukraine is one of the few countries in NATO that have a lot of civilians who know how to use guns. And then you have lots of some of them were neo-Nazi movements and so on. They've managed to habituate these former ideologies, so they rechannel their energy and they've kind of reformed their ideology. So they're kind of resistance movement for Ukraine, and these are very experienced fighters, like kind of commandos. So you've got all these people and some of them will be in Kiev, and then as soon as this has started, then they'll be homing in on Kiev from all around Ukraine. The national anthem of Ukraine has a line in it about willing to sacrifice their lives to protect their country. It's in their ethos, and they've got a long history of doing that. So they wouldn't be like the corrupt Afghan government. You're talking about the entire people there being opposed to the Russian puppet government. And after weeks of fighting, it's not days, eventually you manage to suppress Kiev in some way, maybe. But I mean, if you look at some of the battles to to try to capture even quite small cities, like 250,000 or something, and that could take 2 months. And that I was thinking about, like in the Iraq War. And so you're not talking about something that you're finished in 3 days with 3 million people, with 30,000 people trying to subdue it, and with the entire country against you. The whole thing is potty. It doesn't make sense. I don't believe that the American generals really take this seriously as a plan. There's no way. They know this. They know all this stuff. There's no way they can really seriously believe this. So I've no other choice. I don't know what else to make of it. That it's some kind of informational disinformation. I think it's meant to confuse people, confuse Russia, and meant to try and get Russia to keep saying they're not going to invade or something. I don't know what the reason is, but there's no way that the United States really believes this. They can't. It doesn't make sense. No well-trained, experienced general would believe that they could install a puppet government and take over the whole of Ukraine by installing a puppet government in a city of 3 million in 3 days. It's nuts, totally nuts. So there's no way that Russia. I've talked about in all my other ones about, and there's this thing. So apart from this idea that you just drive down the autobahn to Kiev and you somehow take over the government, and you're not going to be bothered by them firing at you, and that's nonsense. And if they try a really proper invasion, they don't have enough. So the other accounts I saw from people not based on Ukrainians are basing it on their own experience of fighting against the Russians, and they say there's not nearly enough. 130,000. They couldn't invade Ukraine. They say they would need hundreds of thousands of Russians to a large-scale invasion. They could do a small-scale thing of like firing a few missiles to support the people in the Donbass region. They couldn't do a large-scale invasion of trying to take control of a large part of the country. And they say that Russia would need hundreds of thousands of soldiers to do that. And they say you just don't see the preparation and mobilization of soldiers in Russia that would be needed to seriously invade Ukraine. And these are the people in Ukraine who advised the Ukrainian government, and they did this. They did an article all about the military situation. I filled in a few extra bits because it was originally in Ukrainian, apparently, translated into English, and as it was written for Ukrainians, then they would know all this stuff that I'm having to explain to you. And so it doesn't go into all those details. And then this is showing what what the problems they would have if they had a conventional attack, that they were started really attacking the tanks properly and not just all driving down a road exposed on both sides, but doing a proper attack as a kind of long line with a front, so there's no way that there's resistance to either side. And the ground there is very muddy this time of year. It's like a quagmire. And this is, I think this is a tank there. There's a video here, you can watch the video yourself. You see how the tank sunk in the mud. And this was in Belarus, just doing exercises, just now, just a few days ago. And then in the process of the exercise with tanks, then a dozen of them got stuck in the mud. And they had to get this excavator along, and the excavator came and dug the tanks out. So now imagine doing that in Ukraine, in the post while you're invading with all your tanks, you're driving along, and one of your a dozen of your tanks hit a soft patch in the mud, and they all get stuck in the mud, and then you've got to go and get a hold of your excavator. I don't know if they drive along with excavators behind their tanks in these conditions. I mean, they're not armoured, the excavators, so they seem highly vulnerable if they brought in an excavator to try and excavate the tanks. But then surely the soldiers would prevent them doing that. So do they just lose their tanks, and then just sitting ducks for these guns that would just fire? They probably wouldn't even need to do that. Probably just some close-up operation with something much simpler to destroy the tanks just sitting still in the mud. And so surely they lose quite a few tanks, and the invasion would be in these conditions. Then the tanks would be moving very slowly, and I mean it's just not credible that they plan to do that. These are tanks from World War II tanks. They keep pulling them out of Russian bogs, because in World War II, then the tanks would just stop the military operations at this time of when it was like in these conditions, because they just couldn't keep going. And although tanks have improved in many other ways, they haven't improved in this respect, being able to drive through thick mud. A modern tank still can't drive through the deep mud, meters deep of very soft quagmire that they have this time of year in that part of the world. Even a modern tank, it can't do that. It can cope with a bit of mud, but not meters depth of the mud is so deep that a tank can sink into it right up to the turret. That's what you're talking about here, with the weight of a tank. And then they haven't been preparing for this. They haven't done the propaganda that's needed for it. The Russian government have been saying over and over, we're not going to invade Ukraine, and they've been this is France 24 reporter, and he was talking to people in Russia. He said that there's 1.9 million ethnic Ukrainians. He said the taxi driver driving him around was a Ukrainian, or his mother or some of his relatives came from Ukraine, and many of them have relatives in Ukraine. And same in Ukraine, many of them are ethnic Russian, and they see each other as a brother. They see it as a brother nation. It's very much like the relation between, say, United States and Canada. It's just not entirely sure. We've had the Crimea, where there was we don't have any military operations between Canada and the United States, but that connection, very close history and very close connection of each other. Then they have that, and they just haven't been preparing. They haven't done if the soldiers would have very poor morale, because they wouldn't feel they were doing a just war. They would be saying, we've been told over and over again, we're not going to fight, and suddenly we're fighting. Why are we fighting? What's it all about? And so, if they really were fighting, they'd do it very differently. Indeed, Russia they tend to do very minimal operations with the least risk to Russian lives. They don't do the big wars that the United States and NATO do sometimes. And they're much less inclined to do that. They're much more likely to I mean, do small ops that achieve the same goals with much less risk. So it's not, that's not what we're going to see tomorrow. It's now today, the 16th. That's not what we're going to see. So, and this is the study that I told you about, and they ask why are they doing it. They think maybe they see that doing this, it gives an opportunity for pressure and restraint, and on the lines of saying we know about your plans and we're preparing for them, and just totally rejecting the idea of starting a large-scale war, and the Western readiness to. So they're making that message over and over again, but there's no way Russia actually expects that. So what do we expect to happen tomorrow? And you want to say, oh, now, the 16th. So this is the, maybe you don't know this English phrase, the storm, or British, I don't know, is it a British phrase or is it a general one? I'm not sure, I haven't checked, but storming a teacup. It's been people making a lot of a fuss about nothing very much. So the United States and the United Kingdom and NATO generally making a great big storm in a teacup. They're claiming that Russia is going to do a big invasion, and for sure, having all those soldiers marching up and down outside Ukraine, then that's quite a big demonstration of force by Russia. But it's not enough for a proper invasion, and it's not what they would do if they were invading, because. I tried doing this as satire, but it's kind of obvious that if Russia wanted to invade, they would have done it in early 2021. It doesn't make sense to come and march around and wait for your enemy to get stronger, your prospective enemy, they're not enemies yet, to get stronger and stronger, and go away again, and come back again a year later, and it gets even more stronger and stronger, and wait for NATO to become more and more unified, and then decide, oh, this is the time for invasion. That makes no sense. So Russia, they're just going to, and as I said, it doesn't make sense for them to do it during the Olympic. That's going to be, China is not going to be well pleased at all if Russia started a war during their Olympics, because the whole idea of Olympics is supposed to show the Olympic spirit. Indeed, traditionally, you have a truce, and there's a truce for this Olympic. It's supposed to be from 7 days before the start of the Olympic, all the way through to 7 days after the end of the Paralympic, which will be the 20th of March. During that time, the countries involved in the Olympic Games are not supposed to start any new wars. So Russia would, of course, Russia, they felt they had great, people bring up Georgia and so on. This Russia, they mightn't preserve, they mightn't respect that truce, but surely they wouldn't attack during the actual Olympic Games themselves, and especially not when today on Thursday, and their Valieva has their ice skating star is on track to compete for the gold on Thursday. I think to think that the day before that's an ideal day, and why would the United States know the date? How could they know a date when it would only be Putin and the people very closest to him that would know such a thing if there was a date, which there isn't. There's no way that it's a date. Indeed, there's no way it's going to happen at all. The whole thing is just a storm in a teacup. There's not going to be any war, and it just doesn't make sense. And so what we're going to have tomorrow, we're going to have the Ukraine is going to do a lot of flying of flags, and they're going to try and hopefully then they will be trying to get the attention of the cameras, so the cameras show Ukrainians waving their flags and singing the Ukrainian national anthem, and try and make a bit of a show for the world. And that's the old flag. I don't suppose they'll be showing the old flag. That's from 17th century or something like that, quite a few centuries ago. But the modern flag is just a plain blue and yellow, instead of being all that fancy stuff. Just a blue, yellow and blue below each other, blue on top and yellow below. So there'll be a lot of yellow and blue flags being waved and singing the Ukrainian national anthem and making a day of unity. So Ukraine is taking advantage of the attention of the world and the belief that there'll be a war, and sort of showing the other narrative that no, we are ready for, if anyone wants to invade, we're ready, but this is a day of peace and unity. And so they're trying to change the narrative in that way and try to draw attention to their country and show their country in a good light. So that's what we expect tomorrow. It'll be a day of flag waving and a day of celebration of peace and that they haven't been invaded, and seeing how strong they are and how they can resist anyone who attacks, and it's going to be a future of sunshine and peace, and that's what they'll be doing. So anyway, hopefully that helps you a little bit. You've been less scared, and there's no risk. There's no way that they plan to invade. It doesn't make sense. And they've got negotiations going on, continuous, lots of things. Russia I think has just sent their written response to the United States, written response to them. So they're waiting for their response now. So that's what's happening tomorrow. That's what's happening now. And it could be some time before the United States then responds back to Russia. And then Russia has already said that they are that some of their soldiers, they say, are already moving back from their positions. And then the Belarus exercises are due to end on the 20th. So they should all be gone or leaving by the end of the Olympic Games. And so we can expect at the end of the Olympic Games. So if you just enjoy the Olympic Games, have a nice few days, and or whatever, and then hopefully things be a little bit easier after that. But we will see. I think the United States is well capable of constantly saying that Russia is going to invade even after they've retreated back their 30,000 people. They've been saying this every day for several weeks in different ways. So I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to say it so do be prepared for that. I don't think we can guarantee that the United States is going to stop saying this at the end of the Olympic Games or after Russia has removed their people. I hope they do, but I think you need to be prepared and not kind of hope for that, in the sense that you'll be devastated if they keep giving this message. But hopefully people are beginning to see through it, and they're not going to be so scared the more this goes on if they do keep doing it.